Hi guys, this is Mike. In this Cinema 4D tutorial, I'm going to show you retopology of a human head. What you're going to be learning is the retopology of a high density mesh to a low polygon mesh. You also learn the polygon pen tool, understanding facial topology, and then being able to export the low poly mesh out of Cinema 4D. Okay, in this lesson, what I want you to do is open up Lesson 1 Begin. And we can start talking about facial topology as a result relates to characters. So you'll see that we have this male character head loaded into our scene. Now, a lot of times when you're going to be sculpting and you're going to be concepting out a character or a creature, you're going to be doing this and it's not going to have correct topology. And what I mean by that, if you go to NB on your keyboard, you're going to bring up garage shading lines. And if you zoom in a bit, you can see how dense this mesh is in order to keep this details on the character. Now, this will give you some great texture and great details and lines and folds and wrinkles, but doesn't really help you in terms of animating, doesn't help you in terms of its weight that it has in the scene. When you have this and then you have lots of other characters and environments, what you're going to have is a very heavy, dense scene. And what we want to do is we want to lighten this up with our topology and how much geometry we need to hold this detail. So a lot of times what you'll do is you'll sculpt and then you'll bake out displacement maps that you would then add in to your materials. So you would add into your displacement channel in order to bring in your all the lines and wrinkles and textures that you might have for your character and creature. But you'll put this on top of a low polygon mesh, base mesh. So to understand facial topology, it's a little bit different than topology that we have in, say, hard surface modeling. Now, a lot of the concepts is very similar, and a lot of the techniques are very similar, except for the fact that you're going to have deformation in areas that, say, there's going to be a lot of folds and creases, say, around these corners of the mouth and the nose and like maybe around the eyes. You're definitely going to have some animation with the eyelids. Now, this character, if I go to NA on your keyboard, I have the eyelids shut. It's just to make this a little bit more of an easier process. But you're going to have eyelids that are going to, obviously we're going to have blinking, we're going to have closing of the eye. So we're going to need topology that best fits this type of, this layout for this character. So what I want you to do next is I want you to go to your picture window. So if you go to your picture viewer, I want you to load in one of the images that we have for our reference. So if you go to your reference file, you're going to have a few of these images that you can choose from. So let's just go to the front. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to dock this picture viewer to the side here. So I'm just going to grab these lines here and pull it until you see the white line. And now we can clean this up a little bit. Let's move this over here. And we can adjust maybe our size a little bit so we can see our image. So you're going to see that we have our wireframe. And if we zoom in a little bit, you can see how this topology will look. And I'm just kind of getting this into place into position so you can kind of see this a little bit better. So you can see how we have these loops. They'll go around areas that we're going to have a lot of creases and wrinkles. You can see that we have a quad workflow, and there was a few areas that you can adjust a little bit further, say around the eyes if you want to have eyelids, and the mouth. What you can do is you can push in, and what I mean by that is if I zoom in a bit, you can see that we have just a solid piece, a solid polygons that go across the mouth. This can get pushed in to form a mouth, the inside of a mouth, and it can give you that nice ambient occlusion when you have when you render this out. But in order for us to get through this a little bit more simply, I just simply close this part off. Now, this topology map, this image, you can use as a reference when you're doing your geometry. Excuse me. So when you start retopologizing any of your characters, you can always use this as a reference. You don't have to, figure this out as you go. You can always have a reference in order to use for your characters. Now, this is for a human head character, and as you practice sculpting and concepting out, whether you're doing this within Cinema 4D sculpting or if you're bringing it in through another program such as ZBrush or Mudbox, what you can then do is then retopologize that as we're going to be doing now in this course, but this will apply to any character or creature that you're going to be doing. A lot of the concepts are still very similar. Any type of loop situation, any type of area where there's going to be deformation, you want to have the geometry to hold that deformation without having any type of weird artifacts that happen when you're rigging and when you're animating. So in the next lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to start going over the retopologizing of this a human male face. In this lesson, we're going to start retopologizing this high-res mesh that we have for our human head. Now, go to the model layout that we have. So in your right-hand corner, go to model layout, and then reload your picture viewer and dock it to the right side. Now, I already opened up the reference images, so go ahead and open up the reference images in your reference folder and bring in the rest of these images, front, side, back, top, and bottom. And we can go back and forth between these when we need to. So I'm going to go back to front, and I zoomed in, so there might be a little pixelation with the resolution, but that's okay. We can make out the lines that we need to make our topology. Now, I'm going to go to our polygon pen tool. We can reach that with this tool right down here. Now, I kind of dragged this down so it's a little bit hidden in this view, and you can kind of adjust these windows in order to best see what you're trying to, each attribute palette that you have. So what we're going to do is we're going to go to make sure Project Results is checked. And we're going to make sure we don't have our high res selected. So make sure if you have that selected, click off that and make sure that's not selected. And we can start adding in our polygons. Now what we're going to do in this project is that we're going to do one side of the face, and then we're just going to use symmetry. So if I go to our symmetry object right up here in our objects. You can click on this and then go right down to symmetry, and we'll add in our geometry to that symmetry object. Now we're going to be starting off in this side right here along the center line. Now don't worry too bad if your line isn't completely centered. We're going to fix that in a moment. So we're just going to start off right here. So I'm going to add in my geometry, my polygon right here, and just add in your 4 points. And now you have the option to command click and drag, and that's going to make another polygon. And then we're going to click up and drag up into this section as well. Now match your lines with your reference. So we're going to make sure our one line here that goes over the bridge of the nose, it's going to go across, and then we have a line that goes across right across the eye. So just keep these landmarks in mind when you're adding in your polygons. So I like to do the center line first. It just kind of gives me a bearing. And so I'm going to click and drag, and you may have to adjust as you add in your polygons. So command click and drag on the line. You can see that as it's highlighted. So I'm going to click and drag one more time and again. And we'll have to make adjustments, and we're going to just kind of make sure that this lines up, but it doesn't have to be exactly perfectly. The idea here is just to get your geometry at a low polygon, and it's a lot better than what our high res was. But more importantly than that is to understand why you're making these polygons and what shape that you're making them in. And we're going to talk about that as we go. So we have this line here that goes, a line of polygons that goes right down the center line. Now, if you want to make sure you have your polygons centered, these center lines, so I'm going to, with my live selection tool, just select these points. What we can then do is right click, and we can go down to set point value, or MU on your keyboard. So we're going to go set in the X. So we're going to have set, and then we're going to go to world for our coordinate system. And then we're just going to apply. Now that's going to snap these points to the center line. And you can do that periodically if you accidentally move these points, or as you go down to the top and the bottom of your polygon mesh. Okay, great. So let's go back to our polygon pen tool, and let's continue on making some of these polygons based on our reference. So I'm going to click and drag, command click and drag on this line to bring out, and then we're just going to shape it exactly how we have with our eye, right near our eye. And this is going to be the eye loop. Command click and drag, and this will snap to our point, and we should have a snap here, I believe, or auto weld, excuse me. So we have auto weld that will automatically weld those points together. So I'm gonna just drag each individual point, and I'm going this pretty slow just so you can follow along. But now what we're going to do is make a loop, an eye loop for our mesh. And you're going to see this over and over again within your facial topology. You're going to see these loops. And I'll show you what I mean in a second as I continue on building out this loop. And it looks like this one connects here. May have to just shape this just a bit. I think that looks okay. And you can see that we have a line that goes across right here. And you can simply, looks like I accidentally clicked. And I'm going to command click, that's going to snap to that end. Command click, snap, command click, and I'm going to snap this point to here. And I'll simply just go into command click and snap this one to here. Pull this point, whoops, excuse me. Pull this point, snap to there. And then we have this empty gap. We're gonna snap to this point. And just be a little careful if it doesn't snap perfectly. You can always just kind of readjust, snap these 2 points together, and you may have to move that line out of the way and then snap that. And then what we can do is just readjust, make sure everything is in a pretty good spot. And like I'm saying, I'm using this as a reference. Okay, so we have this I loop, and what I can do is I can go to polygon mode, and then I can go to UL, and you can see when I go to UL, we go to loop selection. When we go to our loop selection, you can see that when I hover over these polygons, we get this highlight. We get this white highlight or this light gray highlight that loops around this edge here. Now, this is important when we're doing any type of deformation. You can see that this is a continuous edge flow. And continuous edge flow is basically when a line goes from one point to its corresponding, it's one line to its corresponding line directly across. Now in this case, if I zoom in, you can see that we have a line here and a line here right across. So this is important when we're doing any type of subdividing. We know that when we subdivide, it's going to subdivide exactly predictable, and that's going to help us when we're going to be deforming. And then when we put this, say for an example, if we subdivide in our subdivision surface, or if we subdivide through our menu, or if we bring this back into a sculpting program such as ZBrush or the native sculpting tools that we have here in Cinema 4D. It's all going to subdivide and deform very predictably. And the reason why that's important is because, make sure I deselect that. The reason why that's important is when we're deforming, we're not going to have any weird lumps. We're not going to have any weird artifacts when we're animating. Say, for an example, expressions of the eye. We scrunch up the nose when we frown or if we squint. So it's important to have that topology with our characters. Okay, so I just wanted to be pretty clear the reason why we're making these edge loops around facial sections of the object, of our character, I mean. So if I zoom out, you can see this a little bit more clearly. And let me go to 100% resolution. And let me bring this over. You can see the loops around the mouth. You can see these continuous edge loops here This goes around. This is the normal wrinkle that goes across your mouth, from your nose to your mouth and your eye. So these are all very important landmarks to understand. That's where we're going to be adding in our loops. And that's why, say, if you take a sphere that we have here in Cinema 4D, that even though it's round, we have a spherical object, it doesn't give you the resolution, the topology that you need. So if I go to my sphere and I bring down the radius so you can see, whoops, that's segments. And I'm just going to drag this over. You can see this resolution that we have here. If I bring up our lines, you can see this doesn't help us, even though it's, it's a sphere. It's something that we could use maybe to shape out our human head or a character head, or a creature head, but it doesn't give us the resolution, doesn't give us the topology that we need for our characters. Okay, so back to our NA, so we can go back to our lines, go back to our polygons, and we'll go back to our points. Okay, so I think this is a good start. Now in our next lesson, what we're going to do is we're going to continue on developing the topology of this face and around the mouth, the nose, and this cheek. And we'll move along and we'll start getting farther along in retopologizing this human head. So let's continue making the rest of this facial topology. I'm going to command click and drag, snap here and snap here, and click and drag and snap here. Now it's a little bit difficult to see if you can try to make out these lines here that go around the eye. Snap here. This kind of goes back a bit. And you can kind of rotate around, see how this is progressing. Maybe pull this a little bit closer. And so it's really just another loop that goes around the eye. Except in this case, we're pulling up a little bit further. And you can see here, let me rotate around a bit, maybe zoom in a bit too. And I'm just kind of eyeballing how this is progressing. And you can see how this, and you kind of have like a smaller polygon here. And we can command click and drag, rotate this out, and then weld these two together. They'll just snap right together. And this sort of has a more of a slope, or an angle, I should say. And then command click and drag. Oops. Try to grab that line. And then pull this down and back. Now I'm going to save this one a little bit for later as we take a look at the side view. We can kind of see how that loops around. Now you can see that this is our loop that goes around here. We have sort of this connection that happens here at this corner. So if it helps, you can count loops. We have our eye loop here. We have our around the eye loop here. And then we have another loop that comes across here. So 1, 2, and then we'll need another one here. So we can pull this back and down. Maybe pull this over a little bit. Snap that here. And then snap this one together here. And so I'm going to pull this closer to the ear, right here. And so that's our corner point right here. So it's just really kind of using these landmarks, and maybe I can rotate this around a bit, kind of see how this is progressing. And I always want to try to keep the polygons as square as possible. That will help with the subdividing. And so we have sort of this pole. I shouldn't really say it's not really too much of a pole, but it kind of looks like a pole. And I don't want to go too farther because I want to continue with the rest of, oops, accidentally deleted that. The rest of our topology for just the face. Make sure I grab the point. And this will be for our chin line. Okay, so let me rotate this around and continue on here. We'll spend a little bit more time on the side a little bit later. I really want to focus more on the facial topology, because I think that's what the most important part is. And I just want to make sure I'm kind of losing this in the mesh. Okay, so let me go back to my front view, and I'll pull this over to the side, maybe zoom in a bit, if that helps. So we have our eye loop here, and just feels like I want to make sure I have this correct. Oops. Okay, so we have our loop here. Let's go around the mouth, and it will help when we work on the side view, when we look at the side of the nose, because we kind of lose a little bit. Like we can see where we have this one nose polygon, and that kind of pulls out here. And then we can kind of see this one here, and command click and drag and pull that one out. But I think we kind of lose a little bit when we get down into this portion here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with the mouth. Just command, or excuse me, add in a polygon here. So that'll be the top of his lip. And then command click and drag. Command click and drag again. Pull this one in, command click and drag. And then command click and drag, snap this one here and pull this one up. And now I'm going to command click and drag and make this mouth loop. Oops, let me pull this a little bit further down. Make sure I grab the line. Command click and drag. And I'm just kind of counting polygons here. And, you know, as I go through this process, you can see that basically what we're trying to accomplish is have a low polygon mesh that is easily subdivided. So even though this is very low, very low resolution, you can easily just subdivide and you'll get the resolution that you need if you want to start with a base mesh that's a little bit higher res than this. But understanding these loops at such a low resolution will kind of help you get your head around the topology, because if it's too much resolution, then it just becomes a little overwhelming. Okay, so I'm looking at this corner here. So that's making this bit of a corner of the mouth. Command click and drag and pull this one out. Whoops. And then command click and drag and snap this together. And I'm just kind of looking at this, eyeballing this up. Command click and drag, pull this together, and then snap these two just there. And we have this that comes around here. And so I know that this edge will snap to this corner here. So it's really just kind of spacing this out a little bit more and keeping an eye on your reference. You know, I'm staying pretty exact to what we have here. A lot of times that you'll be doing your topology and it may not always line up. You might make a mistake in terms of where the polygons are. And you might have a triangle, for example. It's really just understanding the process and the process of how we go about making these topologies, making these loops. So it's really just sort of a loop around the mouth and the eyes, and then looping around there, and then in order to connect everything, you're going to have a few 5-sided poles to connect everything together. Now, usually you probably heard me in the past say that, you know, poles aren't so great. They're kind of unavoidable, especially when you get into facial and character topology. Just as a general rule, you want to kind of avoid the 5-sided poles, and those are 5 lines coming out of one point, one vertex. And so I'm just kind of going around here, connecting these. Connect here. And so I just want a 1, 2, and then 3. And so this will connect to here. And I feel like I pulled this up a little bit or pulled this down too far. So I want to bring these points up a little bit and kind of even them out. So the polygon pen tool is really a nice feature in Cinema 4D. I find that it's sort of a pleasure to to work within any 3D modeling within Cinema 4D when I'm using the polygon pen. Okay, so I just want to make sure I got this correct. And it's easy to kind of lose your bearings as you're looking through a sea of polygons. So I always, whenever I feel like I'm losing my bearings, I always go to the center line and I see how this is progressing from here to, and then this comes across here, which is this corresponding polygon here. And then we have this one here. Okay, so we're in good shape. And now I can just pull this and make this other loop. So we're in pretty good shape. This is the hardest part, really. I find when doing topology is just getting the facial topology loops correct. And once you get that, then it's really just sort of pretty easy modeling and moving points around for the side and back and the top of the head. I always find a little bit of trouble with the nose, and we'll take a look at that as well. So I look like I'm in some pretty good shape here. And we can make adjustments. You know, it's you're gonna notice once you take your high-res model down, you can kind of take a look at see how things are progressing. Sometimes it gets lost a little bit in your high-res mesh. So you always kind of, every once in a while, take a time off and turn off your resolution, turn off your high-res model, and then see how your retopology is turning out. Sometimes you might not see a triangle or something, or a gap that you just didn't see before. So go back and forth between this and that. I think that might help you a little bit too. So I think we're in good shape. Let's take a look down here. We have this corner here. So let's pull this up. Command click and drag. Now does this connect to this one here? Let's look at our side. Let's take a look. So it looks like and we have our 1, our 2, and our third loop here. And I'm just kind of looking here. Okay, so this will come down. Here. Yeah, sums up. So let me undo back and see where I made a mistake. Looks like I might have added in a polygon. Let me delete this one. Command click and drag and then snap this one here. Maybe I just didn't see that one before. So like I said, kind of helps to turn off your high res, see if you've made any mistakes. And so we have this one. Let's go back to the front view. Rotate this around. And where I'm looking at here, and sorry if I'm going a little bit back and forth too much, but where I'm looking is we go down this row here, right at the top, this middle polygons. I'm just going down this amount and seeing where we are, because I'm looking at this detail, this refinement here as this polygon comes down here. So I'm going to pull this down a little bit and I want to command click and drag, snap this together here. Actually, it makes more sense to pull this here and snap this together here, because this will be the corner. And I'm pulling this up, just kind of making a little bit of a balance here between my topology, because I know I'm going to have some more polygons here when I look at the side view. So I'm going to be going back between the side view. I'm going to spend a whole lesson, the next lesson, and looking at the side. I just want to kind of get the front view kind of together. But you'll find you'll be going back and forth between the side view and the front view of these references to kind of get things together. Let me rotate around and let me turn off my high res for a second. And so this is the one that I just made here. That's this here. And then so what I'm going to do is I'm going to command click and drag, pull this down to here, snap this here, and I got a triangle here, and I want to take a look at that, see where the mistake was. There might be one extra, and I feel like there's an extra polygon that's coming across. And I think that's what's happening. Okay, so that kind of makes a little bit more sense. And then, get rid of that. We have an extra line there. And pull that to here. And that makes a little bit more sense. Although this is a pretty large polygon. So I'm just gonna, large in terms of it's kind of elongated a bit. And let me bring back my resolution here, making sure that I have everything correct. And this kind of comes across here. So I'm really just kind of using my reference and this probably has to come down here and just kind of spacing things out a little bit more. So I kind of feel like it's a little stretched out over here. Okay, we're in pretty good shape in terms of our polygons. I want to go to polygon mode, do a select all, and you see here that we have this blue polygon here. It looks like I reversed the normals in this one polygon. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to right click and I'm just going to go to align normals. So that might have happened when I deleted that one line from the back. We got turned around on that polygon. So whenever that happens, sometimes you might see some weird shading for your polygon. On occasion, what you want to do is, this what helps me is I select all, and I know if everything is orange, everything's good. If I see a blue, that means we have a reverse normal, and you just go right click, align normals. Okay, so great. What I want to do in the next lesson is to look at our side view, get this nose connected, and we have that, and then we're going to start looking underneath. We'll take a look at the bottom of the chin and the top as well, and get this cleaned up. And then once we have this completed, we'll just do some minor refinements and talk a little bit about what step goes on after that. In this lesson, we're going to finish the nose and then finish out the rest of the head. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate around to on the side view for the Retopology section, and I can look at the side view of our reference. And you can see how it's a little tricky right in this corner. So I'm going to show you how to get around a little bit of this issue. So command click and drag, and you'll pull out your extrude this one polygon. Now what you want to do is you want to snap this polygon, this point. So if you have to, rotate this around and snap this point here. Let me rotate back. And let me get back to this point. It's kind of hidden by that other polygon. So you can see how we have this edge here kind of comes down this way. So what we're going to do is we're going to pull this polygon out so it snaps right here. And this point will snap here. We can pull this polygon here, snap these two together, and if you have to, you can just drag the line. And then we can just make a quad here by pulling this one out, this line, and snap this point there and snap this point here. So now you have this all connected. Now if you go underneath, I'm going to rotate this over here. I don't know if we can see too much from the bottom, so I'm going to pull this back here, but basically you just got to remember a quad workflow. So you're going to snap this here and then snap this point and this point here. So we have two polygons here. If you have to, we can adjust these polygons here just so it's a little bit more even. And in fact, you're probably going to be doing this a lot, is just kind of making some adjustments so you smooth this out a little bit. And I'm going to show you at the end how you can smooth out, even out these polygons a little bit more. So let's move around here to the side. And let's go back to our side view for our reference. And if it helps, you can bring the resolution, or bring the percentage down so you can see the whole head. Bring this up a little bit more. And we can bring back our high-res model too. Now you're going to see that we have this geometry for the ear, and you can look at the reference here. This is okay because you'll be able to still subdivide this ear and pull this out. So I'm going to keep that the same. And that's pretty easy to accomplish. What really all this is if you command click and drag, snap these two together. So we now have this ear. We can simply just go to our polygon mode, select these two polygons, I for extrude inner, and then we'll just extrude inside. We'll hide our high res for a second so I can show you how this looks. And if you have to, we can just make some adjustments to this. So it benefits us a little bit more. And just kind of tighten that up a little bit. Oops. So that's all you really need to do for the ear at this point. Let me bring back the high res. And now let's take a look at this geometry. Let me hide this for a second. And we can kind of look at our geometry at the top of the head. Let's take a look at the top and see if this can benefit us a little bit more as we rotate around and continue bringing in our geometry. So we know we have this point here, this one rectangle polygon, and this one that comes out here, that's this. And then we already made one up here. So we're going to be making 1, 2, 3. So let's pop in 1, 2, and then 3. And then we'll do the same thing here, here, and here. Let's take a look how that looks. Okay, so let me go back to our high res. So it looks like we lost a little bit of our connection here. So let me undo that. Bring back our high res. Okay, that's better. So let's take a look at where this is positioned. And another landmark that you can use is the ear. So I'm going to move in, and you can kind of see where this ear is. It's very similar to what we have with our reference. So we have this little corner, this little pole here that we have. We have 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So we may have to pull this back a little further. And I'm just trying to get this pretty close to what we have for a reference. I don't think it has to be super exact, but we're trying to get this as close as we can. And then you're going to have one that comes out a little bit. And I think what I did before is I pulled that out a little bit too far, so we lost our connection with our model. Okay, good. So we're looking good. I'm going to hide our resolution, or hide our high res, and then just snap everything together. Come back around, and let's go to our side view. So we have this is our side. So let me bring back our model, and we can make some adjustments here. Losing my point, so we can just pull this back, pull this back here. Okay. Now I want to take a look at where this ear is. So we got this connection. And we may need to bring this up a little bit. So looking at my reference, you can kind of see where our polygons kind of round out, and kind of this loop that goes around and makes this sort of little polygon that's sort of like almost like a triangle in a way. So I want to move these points that I made back a little bit further. See, we don't need as much detail or as much geometry in the top and the back of the head as we do in the face facial area, so we can get away with not having so much geometry at the top and the back. So I'm going to move these points back, and they're going to be a little bit bigger, as you can see on the side, and you can see a little bit better in the top and the back. Back here. So I want to move these points back, but before I do that, we can kind of been going back and forth with the high res and hiding the high res because we kind of getting a little bit lost with our mesh. But what we can also do is we select the high res, and you're seeing that because of the points are so big. But if you go to your X-ray in our basic tab, you can just click on X-ray, and now when you go to your polygon mesh, or low polygon mesh, the one that we're retopologizing, you can see a little bit better than before. So that just kind of helps you instead of going back between hiding the high res and then back and forth. So let's pull these points back, and we'll have a much larger amount. We can move this one as well. Pull these guys back a little bit. So it is like, a lot of moving around, a lot of points and edges, kind of getting things the way that you want it. I like anytime I'm doing any retopo, I will just put my headphones on and just kind of move points around. I kind of find it to be a little relaxing, actually. Some people might find this kind of tedious, but after you get used to it and you do it a few times, let me undo that. It comes a little bit faster. You'll get faster at this. So what I want to do is I'm just kind of looking at my ear, top of the ear as a reference, and so we can move this back a little bit. We can pull this pretty far back, actually. Let me rotate around, bring this back up over. And I know I lost this center line. I'm going to reset that. So I'm going to command click and drag, snap to this point here, snap to that point. Now you can see this polygon right on the side here, and I'm going to move these points over, give myself some room here. And I'm going to command click and drag and snap this point here, and we'll move this down slightly, I guess. And then bring this back up over here. So a little bit readjusting. And I don't know if you can hear it through the microphone, but I have a bit of a storm here up in the northeast of the United States. So sorry if that's kind of coming through in the microphone. So I'm pretty close to a window. So we have this one that we made. And that's right, kind of, you can see that corner of the mesh. Now I'm going to pull this, snap this to here, and then bring this one down here. So you can kind of see how this kind of rounds a little bit. And you may have to readjust these points. And this comes down to the back of the head. Let's get this squared away here. And now, if you pull this one back down a little bit, you can snap this one to the ear, the top of the ear, and then we're going to command click and drag, snap that to here. Now let's go at the back of the head. Rotate this around, and you can kind of see what's happening up at the top here. Now we have 1, 2, 3, 4 polygons in the back of the head that kind of come down from the center line, which is right here. And we lost the center line, so I'm going to readjust these points. So what I'm going to do is just kind of select these points here. And this will help me get my bearings a little bit too. And I'm just going to hold down Shift with the Live Selection tool. Select all these points. It's good to do this periodically, because if this isn't correct, then what you're going to have is you're going to have a seam. So when we put in the symmetry, so if I right click, set point value, we'll have in the 0, should be the same as before, so we shouldn't have to touch anything. And let me just bring this down a bit and then apply, and that'll snap to the center line. Okay, so I'm just gonna click off into the canvas, deselect those, and then like bring this back. Okay, so let me get back to my polygon pen tool, and let's see what we can see here. So I'm going to command click and drag, pull this down. Bring down another one. And go back to the side. So you'll be going back and forth between the side and your back view. So I'm going to command click and drag, snap this to here. Now you'll see down at this corner here, right at the ear, so we're going to have this other polygon that's going to snap down here. Now that's this corner here. Right down in here, we'll have another polygon that comes down here, and that's going to be the start of your chin line. And I'm just going to pull this, snap this down here. Pull this, snap here. And we're going to pull this, snap, or not snap, but pull this out. Make sure we want to do this again. That's better. Now you can see how this thing is back here. I'm going to go to the, not the bottom, the back. You can see how we have this sort of weird geometry that's going on over here. So we're going to command click and drag. This is going to snap here, and this will snap here. So I can pull this back over a little bit. Make sure that's correct. And this will be our center line again. And then this will just come down for our neck. We got 1, 2, 3, 4. And it looks like this might be the bottom. So 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay. And then we go to the side. Same thing. 1, 2, 3, and 4. So we have that comes down. And you'll see this one, which will be right here underneath the ear. So I'm just going to command click and drag. Make sure I'm off. Yep. Do that again. I definitely don't want to do that. And I just want to take a look at, I just want to make sure, let me move over to the side, and I want to just make sure I get this correct, because you can see how this chin line goes across. And we're going to have another one comes down. We're going to take a look at the bottom. Just make sure we got this on point. And that's the center line, excuse me, that's the chin line right here. And then this is gonna split off. So I'm gonna bring this out. And I'll take a look at that chin line in this, and I'll pull this one out, and this will be the center of the neck. And then I'll just bring this back down. Snap that here. So let's take a look at the front. And I'm just going to bring this one around, and another one that goes right here. And let's take a look at the bottom. This is going to be also a little tricky. The other thing that I don't particularly like is that you'll see this pole here, this 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6-sided pole. Generally a no-no. However, it's right under the neck and the chin, so you're not going to see it too much. But I just want you to be aware that that is something that we try to avoid in facial topology. So I'm looking at this chin, and this is going to snap here. I'm going to pull this one all the way to the neck. This will come across here. And I just want to bring this down over here. Snap that here. Let me take a look here. See where this is going. Whoops. Be careful about your backgrounds. Sometimes you'll pick up something in the totally back of your model. So we'll just snap that here and just kind of even things out. So we are in pretty good shape here. And you can adjust your points here around the ear a little bit. And I'm just kind of looking around the model. Looking pretty good. And I'm going to set this center line again. So let me zoom out. And I do have this opening here. I'm going to pull this down and just kind of tuck this as this goes. And it looks like this isn't connected, so snap that, weld that. And we can do this, we can close this polygon hole. You know, obviously, if you're going to be doing a body, you're going to leave that open. If it's just going to be a bust that you can sculpt on, we'll close that up. Okay, so let's now put this into a symmetry object. But first, I want to make sure I have this center line set before I add in a symmetry. So just kind of seeing if I can add in a, whoops. Okay, so I'm select boundary loop, and I'm just kind of selecting a whole loop of points, and I'm zooming out. So if you select boundary loop, have that checked, you can select this whole loop. Issue is it also catches these points here. So not a big deal. You can just control click and drag with your live selection so you can deselect those points. So now all you have is the points that are selected on the center line. And then what I want to do is go back to, I believe it's MU on your keyboard to bring up set point value, set in the X, world system, and then apply. And now snap to your center. And now what we'll do is we can just simply hide our high res and then bring in a symmetry object. So I'm going to click over here, bring in our symmetry, take our polygon, our new Retopology, put that into symmetry, and we can go into our regular mode here. We can go to MB on our keyboard just to bring up our garage shading lines. And we're looking pretty good. Just kind of doing a once over, kind of looking at everything, making sure everything looks pretty good. And then what we can do is we can select symmetry and then make that editable. So now you have this full geometry retopology of your high-res head. So in the next lesson, what I'm going to do is I'm going to wrap this up, talk a little bit what you can do at this point after you have your low-res mesh. Okay, I want to wrap up this course by talking about what you can do now once you have your base mesh and it's all retopology. And at this point, we can take a look at the bottom here, and we can close up this hole. Now we can just go to your polygon mode. We can go to MD on the keyboard, and that will close polygon hole, KK. And now we can just go to our center line, and then we can crisscross that, giving us a quad workflow. So now that's closed up. At this point, what we can do, we can leave it as is, and you can use this as a base in which you can sculpt on. So you can use this in the Cinema 4D sculpting layout, which you can go into here. And you can do any of your sculpting if you want. Now, what you can also do, and also you can export this as an OBJ to another sculpting program such as ZBrush or Mudbox, and you can sculpt in there. You can use GoZ in order to go back and forth between ZBrush and Cinema 4D. If you just want to export, you can just go to File, Export, and then come down here, Wavefront OBJ, and export that out as an OBJ. You can then also bring this into UV Edit. So if you go to your model, BP, UV Edit, and then you can add in your UV maps. At which point then you can bring that into, after you sculpt, you can bring that into body paint, and then you can start painting on your character. Generally, I like to do the UVs before I go into sculpting. You can do it that way, or you can export the OBJ with the UVs into something like Substance Painter or Mari, and then do your painting and texturing in those programs. So you definitely have a few options here. One last thing that I want to talk about is if I zoom in a little bit, you can see that this eye is now sort of just a kind of a closed eye. If I go into, say, our polygon mode, and let me just delete this for a second, and we can delete this opening. And I'll go to my polygon pen tool. Whoops, didn't want to do that. Command click and drag. Now you can bring in these points, these polygons, and I gotta be careful about the background. Let me go to point mode. And you can snap these together. And I just want to show you what you can do if you want to do a eyelid, excuse me. And I feel like let me make sure I didn't just kind of looking at the points back here, make sure I didn't grab one of the back points. Okay, so I can snap this together. At this point, what I then can do is command click and drag and pull this inwards and do this for the back as well as here. And let me undo, make sure I'm getting this correct. And you can see as I'm bringing this on the inside, may have to adjust your view. But what you can then do is now you have an eyelid, and you can do the same thing for the bottom eyelid. Whoops, not that. And connect that. Let me try that again. And I can click and drag and bring this out here. And then I can just simply make a box within the eye and then close that up. You know, you can just kind of snap this together like this and then close this up. So you have some options here in terms of the eyelid. If that's what you want to do, you can certainly do that, and I can close that up a little bit. Whoops. Snap that together. And so now you have this eyelid, and of course you'll have to delete this one side, bring this back into a symmetry object, and then make that symmetry object editable just like we did before. So you can do it that way as well. Let me undo everything. Go back to what we had before. So you can do that, and you can do something very similar with the mouth. And for this, very simply, is if you want to select these polygons, and I'll go into live selection, select this row of polygons, and then simply just extrude inwards. And now you have, and you can open this up, maybe extrude again, inwards, and then kind of T on your keyboard, and we can expand that out. So now you have this slight opening for the mouth. So you can do that as well. Undo back. So, you have some options there, as well as if you want to have a little bit more realism in terms of the mouth and the eyes and the eyelids. So you can do that as well. And again, let everything that I said before you can do: UV, sculpt, export, and do that as well. So what else? You're pretty much in a good position with this base mesh to do pretty much anything that you want to do. The one last thing I want to talk about, and I didn't really, and this is something you would do before you would add in the symmetry, but excuse me, what you can then do is if you go to one of your brushes, say you can go to brush, and then you can go to smooth, and you can go to surface, and we can bring down the strength considerably, say something like 10%, and we'll bring down the radius. We can use the bracket keys to bring down the radius, maybe bring this all the way down. And what you can do is use the smooth to adjust your, and we can go to the point mode if that will help, to adjust a little bit of your mesh. So if it's a little off, you can export this, or excuse me, not export this. You can then smooth this out. Looks like we have a little bit of a disconnect here, so I'll fix that as well. But actually I can even bring this down to maybe even 5 or 3%. And you can just use this as a way to smooth out your mesh and even out your polygons. You can do that as well. I'm going to undo back to where I was with the before I start smoothing, and I just want to take a look at this one polygon, and it looks like this disconnected actually. Not sure how I did that, but let me just snap this together. Let me zoom in. Maybe I hit the disconnect command accidentally. Let me go to rectangle selection. MQ on the keyboard will bring up your weld. And then we can just snap that. And you can use space bar to go back and forth between the last used tool. So that's all I'm doing here. So rectangle selection, space bar, rectangle selection, space bar, and that connects. And do we have another issue here? Looks like we got something else going on. And this might have been when I was, let me zoom out. Whoop, yep. I might have grabbed one of the points from behind. No problem there. So, little things to get this correct. And you can always go to your rectangle selection. Make sure you have only select visible. Let me think about that one for a second. Actually, pull that out. Just select that MQ. Snap that there. And I think we're in good. Oh, one little spot. So bear with me as I just kind of adjust these and just make sure everything's all set. So what you then can do is, if you want, you can select all your polygons and just kind of take a look, make sure there isn't any reverse normals like I showed you before. What else? We can go to modeling mode, mesh checking, enable mesh checking, and we can look at things like here it says a purple complex pole. So we have a complex pole here, meaning we have six sides. And we shouldn't, yep, we have another one down here at the bottom. So it's good to take a look at the mesh checking and make sure you don't have, it gives you an idea of what you're dealing with. Now, it's saying everything is pink. We have non-planar polygons. You're going to have that within a base mesh. But, it's just a good thing to take a look at. Make sure you don't have any, anything that's out of place. And you'll have this, will let you know if you have, like I said, complex poles and reverse normals and this kind of thing. So you want to take a look at this as well. So I think this pretty much wraps up this course. Like I said before, what you can do now is a really good base mesh. What you can then do is to start sculpting on and develop your sculpts based on a solid topology, like what we talked about with the loops. And real quick, actually, before we wrap this up, now that we have this whole base mesh and I have my polygon selected, what I can do at this point is, let me go to UL, make sure I take off select boundary loops. What I can then do is I can show you now these loops a little bit more clearer. If you do these selections, and these are proper edge flow, and you can see the edge flow as it goes around your model, and it's very, very good edge flow in terms of deformation. So I just wanted to show that kind of really, once you have everything set, you can make these selections for around the mouth, around the eyes, and around the face a lot better. I put a link in the description to download project files. You can also go to astronomic3d.com to download project files from this tutorial and all the tutorials that I've made so far. Thanks for watching.